Thanks for tuning in for another episode of our series of CIRP's mental health webinars. Enjoy and let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
My name is Lindsay Kearns, and I am the Outreach Coordinator with the BC Centre for Women in the Trades, also known as BCCWITT, which is a partnership of women from the trades, industry, and labour committed to creating a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the trades and other underrepresented sectors. And Vicky, for those of us, or those of them out there who are new viewers, could you tell us a little bit about Construction Rehab?
Hi, Lindsay. Absolutely. Construction Industry Rehab Plan is a mental health and substance use program for the unionised construction sector. So we provide treatment, we provide prevention and promotion strategies, we provide programs, education to the industry. So not only do we provide services to individuals themselves, we also provide services to their family members as well. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So before we start, please let us know what BCCWITT, as well as Construction Rehab, can do to support you, all of our community here in the trades, to maintain positive mental health. So we have the polls mentioned earlier by Nicole that are down below, and you can also use the chat feature to send us your thoughts and comments, and as well as the Ask a Question feature. So Vicky, we know that workplace bullying is an issue in the industry. Can you tell us more about this, what this means in terms of the psychology?
For sure. I think the first place we start is workplace bullying is a huge issue. We know this. And I think we have to recognise that workplace bullying actually is it matters. It's something that's not something we should just be brushing off lightly as just, it's a bit of hazing, or it's just something that comes along with being part of this industry. It doesn't, and it shouldn't, or rather it does, but it shouldn't. It has a massive toll on employees. It has a huge psychological impact on people. It has a massive physiological impact on people as well. We know that, in fact, on the program, we see many people who either throughout their childhood or actually currently being bullied at the workplace. They've developed PTSD as a result of this. So very significant and severe psychological and physiological impacts of bullying. Bullying is also costly. So if you're an employer and you're watching, and you might be thinking, well, how it's just bullying. One of the things to remember is bullying is very, very costly. Apart from anything else, your company reputation can be jeopardized. If you are a company that is known where people are hard, or where there's bullying that goes on, that can really start to hit the bottom line. We know that it weakens morale, and that in and of itself is lots of studies have been done around the impact of morale and direct cost dollars around that. It's difficult to retain staff when you have an organisation where there is this reputation for hazing or bullying that goes on. And of course, the obvious part of this is that it's costly in litigations as well if there is bullying going wrong. With bullying and bullying, I think the other thing that I'd really like to talk about is harassment and the difference between bullying and harassment. Bullying and harassment are very similar, but they are actually very different. So under the definition of, my apologies here, just bear with me. So bullying is really about the aggressor and a victim, and it involves a power imbalance. It's when bullying is really about exerting your power over somebody else. Harassment is a form of discrimination, and it's actually a legal issue. So there's slight differences there. So when we talk about bullying, we have to recognise that this really is about two people, or maybe more than two people, and it's about a group or one person exerting power over another. The definition of discrimination when we talk about harassment is when somebody is discriminated against because of their age, their race, their ethnicity, their sex. As a woman, you might be discriminated against. Sexual orientation, your family status, marital status, your physical and mental disabilities. The definition of bullying in psychology is it's when there is a physical or verbal abuse that occurs repeatedly, and it involves that power imbalance between two or more people that results in a negative outcome. So what you can see there is they're different, but very related as well. So under provincial laws, bullying isn't covered under provincial laws in terms of legislation, but harassment definitely is. And what you'll find is that any time there is bullying in the workplace, it can be covered or it can lead into harassment, into that area where it's turned into a harassment. Now that said, it's not a defence. You know, bullying is the fact that it's not covered under legislation specifically is not a defence. So even though it's not explicitly stated in regulations, employers have a responsibility by law to provide a fair workplace, a fair work environment. So they're required to make sure that employees are protected from physical and mental harm. When we talk about bullying, we're actually talking about a number of different types of bullying. Bullying can be broken down into physical bullying, verbal bullying, social bullying, and cyberbullying. And I think it's important to recognise the different types of bullying that occurs, because I think often we think about bullying in just one way, and it's what we remember from school. But as adults, bullying can look very different. It doesn't always look like it did in the school playground when someone's literally pushing and shoving you around and demanding, you know, that they take your sandwiches or something. And that's not how it looks as an adult. As an adult, it can look quite difficult. And so it's important to understand the different types of bullying and what they look like. So when we talk about physical bullying, we're talking about, just as it says in the description, we're talking about someone who might be spitting, pushing, shoving, destruction of personal property. That's also categorized as physical bullying. So someone that might break your tools on the job, for example, that's actually physical bullying. That's counted as physical bullying. Sexual harassment and, of course, sexual assault, this is all under physical bullying. It's when you have this force and aggression over another person, and it's one type of bullying that's very, very readily identifiable, and it's very easy to recognize. And so personally, I think what happens is, because it's so obvious what's going on, you tend to see less of that. Other than maybe perhaps things like, breaking of tools or hiding of tools and things like that. The rest of it is very, very, very obvious. And so, you know, when something is that obvious, you're more likely to get caught doing it. So people, it's not as common, one would think, in the workplace. But when this does happen, the research actually shows that when this kind of bullying occurs, it tends to be located in the workplace. It doesn't tend to spill over into the person's home. So the person that's the victim, it doesn't tend to follow them home. It is very much located in the workplace. The other type of bullying that occurs is verbal bullying. And this is when somebody uses words to attack another person. So this is around racism and bigotry. And the words are used to, again, exert control over another person. Verbal bullying really turns into harassment very quickly. It's rooted in discrimination. It can include written words. So verbal bullying might be, it's not necessarily just exclusively about what you say, but it can also be about what you write. So bullying can occur in, you know, company emails. So the way or the tone in which people are writing emails, or the tone in which memos are sent out, can be classified as verbal bullying. I think the other part of verbal bullying, which I always find really, for me, it's really cruel and probably the worst kind of bullying for me, is when it can easily be masked as a joke, right? Especially as adults, when we are experiencing bullying, but often the person that's being bullied doesn't always recognize it, because on the other side, it's the bullying is actually occurring as a joke, but it's inherently cruel in nature. It's easy for the person that's doing the bullying to pass it off as, you know, oh, you know, that person was just being super sensitive, or this woman on the job she's been a woman, she's just super sensitive. So it's easy to say, you know, they're just being sent, I was just having a joke. And that can get a bit more difficult for employers to tackle as well. When if someone comes in and an employer is dealing with this issue, goes in and investigates, and the person doing the bullying turns around and says, oh, it was just a joke, sorry, it was just bad judgment on my part. And it's easy to kind of dismiss it as such, and it's harder to identify sometimes. But I think the thing to really kind of recognize when there is verbal bullying going on is that it's actually really cruel in nature. A joke really requires two people to be involved in it. If there's only one person that's involved in the joke and the other person is actually the receiving end of that joke, and it's you know, it touches a nerve or it's quite close to the bone, then you have to kind of think twice about what you're doing there, you know, and that could easily be construed as bullying behaviour. The other type of bullying is social bullying. This social bullying is very much relational in nature, and what that means is it's about separating an individual from his or her peers. It's about creating that social isolation, and it's a very, in my mind, a very insidious type of bullying that occurs. So what you're doing is you're not talking directly to a person, you're not calling them names, you're not writing letters, or you're not putting that bullying down verbally. What's happening is you're actually slowly eroding that person's social network. So you might be talking about that person to somebody else, and so, or negatively to about that person to somebody else. And what happens is that spreads rumors, and so suddenly collectively a group is judging a person or is looking negatively upon that person, and that is social bullying. And again, I think those kind of things as adults we tend to dismiss as, you know, it's just one of these things that happens, or I just need to toughen up. But actually it is very definitely bullying, those kinds of behavior. It's an intentional exclusion from social activities or events. It's when, you know, you find out the next day at work that everybody else had gone for a drink and left you out. And of course, the argument or the rationale behind that is, hey, what we do on our own time is our own time. And it gets dismissed very easily, and it's very easy to dismiss because it's our own time, and you know, and it kind of, you can't, you know, it's just not somebody I would choose to be a friend with. But when there's this deliberate attempt to isolate that person from other people in their networks, it becomes it moves into that bullying territory. The other part of social bullying that for me is quite problematic is that social bullying is really covert in nature, and it's a very quiet type of bullying. It's nothing. It's not very obvious. It's things that it's things like when somebody's eye rolling, right? So how many times have we spoken to a peer or a colleague or a boss, and then they're kind of rolling their eyes at you? That is definitely identified as bullying. So it's that quiet kind of exerting that power over another person, the sighing that happens, you know, or the talking behind somebody's back. The interesting thing about social bullying is that it actually only works when others participate. So it actually requires another person to be involved in that bullying process for it to actually exist. And the problem with it is that often we have this thing called the bystander effect in psychology. And the bystander effect is that I absolutely, for example, I might say, I would definitely not engage in any kind of bullying, but I can see there's somebody being treated badly, but I can also see that there's 10 other people stood next to me. Somebody else will do something about it. I don't have to. It alleviates my responsibility, and I kind of go, you know, I don't need to, because Lindsay stood right here. Lindsay will say something. And so social bullying really does activate this bystander effect, and so that's another way why I feel it's quite insidious. It kind of it grows where people kind of go, although I'm not a bully, it takes my inaction for that bully to be able to bully other people. And so again, it's insidious. There's that word again. And of course, the other part of bullying that's very, I guess, relatively new to us, and perhaps not for the younger generation, but for my generation, definitely, and that's cyberbullying. So cyberbullying is when we are using social media platforms, emails and texts, and we're sending bullying messages, we're threatening messages via text and stuff. And in today's age, one of the things we know, and it's something that as a parent concerns me hugely, and I've had huge discussions in my house about whether my 13-year-old should have had a phone at the age of 12 or not, because for me what happens is there's no safe place. This bullying occurs, it doesn't matter whether you're at home, at work, at school, it follows you wherever you go, because we're constantly glued to our devices. And it can happen, there's examples of where chain emails that have been sent out, and then whole communities have got involved, and you know, bullying a person or people in those kind of situations. And remember, it's really not the message itself, it's the tone of the message, and it's the intentional act of exerting power over another person. And that really is what bullying's about. The impact of bullying on a workplace is huge. We know there's a study done, and they found that the impact of bullying on a workplace was anything between $6 and $13 billion a year. Huge, I know, huge financial impact on bullying, on the workplace due to bullying. We know that bullying leads to higher rates of absenteeism. Employees who are bullied are more likely to take time off work, but then less likely to actually say it's because of bullying. So people that are experiencing bullying will tend to take more vacation time than other people. They'll have more medical appointments than other people. They'll have more time off work than people that aren't being bullied. There was a study that found that victims of bullying are more likely to have prescriptions for psychotropic medications, and so this is medications such as antidepressants, tranquilizers, sleeping pills. So what this tells us is that people are really struggling with bullying, but they're struggling quietly, they're struggling silently, and they're using medications to try and manage that bullying. And of course, PTSD, which I touched on earlier, it's really not unusual for people that go through bullying. One of the things that I think we touched on earlier there is that bullying, I mean, how many times, Lindsay, have you heard somebody in the workplace, and we won't name names, or an employer or a supervisor or a rep on the job, and kind of it's almost used like a productivity tool, right? It's a way of making people work better. If I snap at them, or if I just, it's a way of motivating somebody. But actually, we know that it doesn't actually have that motivating effect. It has a detrimental effect across the entire workplace. We know that productivity declines, the workplace culture generally becomes hostile, worker compensation claims start to increase, they start to go up, extended health benefit costs start to rise, retention and recruitment costs are higher in those organisations where bullying as a culture exists. And of course, you've got the negative publicity that exists for companies that have this kind of a culture. When bullying is brought to light, there's a really interesting study, and it found that actually in the workplace, 70% of bullying actually comes from a boss. It comes from a supervisor on the job site. It comes from someone that's in a higher up position. And that, when you think about it, that actually makes a lot of sense, because again, bullying inherently is about exerting one's power over another, over somebody else. So you're exerting power over another person. And of course, if you have this hierarchy in an organization where you have an employee, a supervisor, a management, and the overall boss, what you find when you have that kind of a hierarchy, there's that natural power hierarchy that exists, and so bullying becomes easier to implement or to take part in. And so a study which I got to tell you, when I was kind of looking at this, and when I started looking at this area, 70% of bullying comes from bosses. That was really interesting to me. And that's actually, in case anybody wants to look that up, that's actually comes from the I think that comes from the Psychologically Safe Workplace document. It's a national document that we have here in Canada. Bullies, one of the things to remember is bullies become bullies because they can. Bullies become bullies because it's tolerated in the workplace. I mean, how many times have we heard, that somebody say, when I push them harder, it gets results. They just don't understand the kind of stress I'm under. I don't have time to worry about how they feel. I've got to get on with it. If they can't handle the pressure, they shouldn't be in the industry. How many times have we heard that one?
Yes. Well, and one of the things that from working with tradeswomen that I've encountered a whole bunch of is tradeswomen not necessarily knowing they're being bullied, and not because they're ignorant in any way, shape, or form, but because, as you mentioned before, it's so insidious. And so instead what happens is they come to, whether it's in person or in an online group or just like through like a chat, they come and they say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing at work. I'm feeling really awful. What do you guys think? And it actually takes other tradeswomen to say, this is bullying. And sometimes it's tradeswomen who are involved with their workplace occupational health and safety, and that's how they know that this is bullying because they've had training on it. But sometimes it's also just having that outsider's view, and you're able to say. And so some of the examples of things that I have heard that tradeswomen experiencing, and actually a couple of them that I've experienced myself, are things such as a coworker giving incorrect information, and so that a person ends up looking bad. A coworker, or what you're saying, like a supervisor, pointing out mistakes consistently, but in a way, like you were saying about tone, and holding a tradeswoman to a higher standard than anybody else in the workplace, and berating them for not doing things properly over and over and over. Similarly, this whole idea of questioning. One of the things as a tradeswoman, I'm sure maybe you already know this, but I'm sure a lot of tradeswomen who are participating today are familiar with, is that our skills and qualifications are frequently questioned. Like walking onto a construction site, people often assume I am an interior designer or something like that, as opposed to, the person here to install your building automation system. And so it's not just that, though. It's actually, if that happens consistently and actually comes from coworkers or other people in the workplace who consistently say things like, oh, I didn't know you knew how to do that, but like over and over and repeatedly in a way, and that is actually bullying. And then you mentioned pranks, and pranks are the sort, they can be a bonding exercise, but like you said, it has to be a joke that everyone's in on, and that is happening on an equal basis. And when it's only happening to one person in the workplace, that's where you really start to see the bullying. And that's where you start to also see this whole thing of like, this is how this affects workplace safety. And that's one of the takes we like to really make sure that people are clear on, is that this is actually a safety issue, because if you aren't part of the team, and that means that people aren't communicating with you properly, and that means that like mistakes can happen, people get negligent, and that's where dangerous accidents happen, is because the correct information isn't being passed around.
Absolutely. And there's that social bullying that we were talking about. It's really the most, sometimes the most difficult to identify. As women, on the job site, in any industry, you're often, you're being too sensitive. That's something you'll hear all the time. You're being too sensitive, or you just took it the wrong way. And my response to that, and if there's anybody listening and you've heard those words, if you've heard you're just being too sensitive, or you've heard you just took it the wrong way, one time is a mistake. One time is okay. Well, maybe I didn't understand. You know, make sure that you are letting someone go. Actually, I didn't take it the wrong way. I really didn't feel that there was in this discussion there wasn't equality, or there wasn't an equal amount of power between the two of us when we were having this conversation. If you're hearing that consistently, then I think you have to take that as a red flag. You have to kind of look at that and go, I think I think I'm being bullied, right? I think this is bullying going on. And that in and of itself isn't an easy conversation to have with ourselves sometimes. You know, we often think of ourselves as strong women. We're confident, we're powerful. And then having to think of ourselves as being bullied can often challenge
like
the way
victim.
that we...
You don't want to be a victim.
You're
but
right.
You have to think of the bigger picture, because if someone is targeting you, then they could be targeting other people, and maybe in the future, or maybe in another setting.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
This is why it is important to go to your occupational health and safety committee at your workplace, to reach out, to tell people what's happening.
Yeah.
And you can't keep it a secret, because that is also how it continues.
Yeah. And I think the other part of this is to say, well, you know, as you said, I think that a lot of people don't actually recognise that they are being bullied. You know, so the key things to listen out for are those words like, oh, you're being too sensitive, or you just need to, you took it the wrong way. And the other thing is physiological symptoms. People that are being bullied will often describe feelings of nausea the day before your work week begins. So suddenly, for no reason at all, work's going to start on a Sunday night. You start on a Monday. Suddenly you're starting to feel sick. Your stomach feels off. You're feeling nauseous, or at the beginning of your shift, for no reason at all, suddenly you've got nausea feelings. That's an indication. And the other thing that will often happen, and this comes up surprisingly and kind of not surprisingly, is that in research, a lot of people will talk about, family members will say, do you know, you're obsessing about work. Stop going on about work. And it could be that this is really taking up a lot of your time. And it's not because, oh, I enjoy work so much. It's usually the other side of it. It's not because, hey, I just love my work. It's usually, oh, this is bothering me at work, or that's bothering me, or so-and-so said this. And family members will start commenting about the fact that you are obsessing about work. And that can be a sign that there's something unhealthy going on at work. You know, unexplained increase in negative health symptoms. And also, do you often feel shame when you have a conversation with someone and you walk away and you feel shame in the pit of your stomach? That's a signal, that's a sign that what you're going through might be bullying. It's important to look out for those.
So, sorry to interrupt, but I have a question. So, Lindsay, you mentioned that it's so important to bring this to occupational health and safety, and kind of to let the higher ups in the company know. But what if you're not quite ready to take this higher up? Is there anything else, or maybe Vicky, you can answer this, is there anything else you can do to improve your situation?
So, Lindsay, I'll speak to psychology. Why don't you take that first and talk about what you can actually do on the job site for that?
Sorry, 1 second.
Oh, the joys of motherhood and working from home, right? I love it. How about I take it first? So from a psychological perspective, what we would say is, if you think that you might be being bullied at work, speak up early. That's the key thing. There's, you know, we've all heard that expression, you know, take an inch, give an inch, take a mile. And so what happens is bullies will take an inch. They're going to test the waters. Bullies don't go in 100 miles an hour. They want to know how safe it is for them to take that mile that they want to take, to exert that power. So they don't usually go in hard and strong. It's very unusual for bullies to do that. So when somebody takes that inch, make sure that you don't laugh it off. You let them know, you know, that comment, it's not okay. It's not okay for you to say that. And the other part of this is, I'm a great, I'm all about psychology. I live, eat and breathe psychology. And we know that in psychology, people generally don't like to think of themselves as mean. Bullies don't like to think of themselves as mean. Aggressors don't like to actually think of themselves as mean people or nasty. So what you can do is actually use psychology. So as a woman, one of the things that I've done many times is say, use people's names. So I might say, hey, John, I know you're a really decent person. So immediately you set them up. You set them up to be decent, and you say, you wouldn't intentionally say X, but come on, that's not cool. So that there's huge amounts of psychology built into that sentence. So what it does is, A, you've used that person's name. So you've really tied the actions that you're going to talk about to that person. And then you set them up. You say, you know, I know you're a decent person. Nobody wants to say, who's going to say, actually, no, I'm not. I'm a really crappy person, right? Nobody's going to say that. So you set them up and you say, I know you're a decent person and you wouldn't intentionally say this, but come on, that's really not cool. And you name what it is. And that is a really, really effective tool to actually cut bullying down in its, stop it in its track. And to use that. I've done that myself. Use people's names a lot. So when you're talking to someone, use their name, because again, when we use someone's name, there's again lots of research in psychology that tells us anytime we use somebody's name, we really bring them back into who they want to be as a person. Has quite a powerful effect. And also stand tall. We say that we talk about this as children, stand tall, stand proud, but bullies don't know who you are as a person. They take a look at you and say, oh, that person's body language is really meek, it's very quiet, that's an easy victim. So the old adage about standing tall and standing proud actually does stand true.
And actually, as you were saying, one of the things about trying to address it directly with a bully, or even just, I've done this with someone who's not necessarily bullying more than one person, but who's using maybe language that's really offensive or such in a workplace. Is one of the things is I do try to get them alone, but I like to tell a guy that he is a leader in the workplace. And sometimes I've told this to women, they said, but what if he's not a leader in the workplace? And I said, it doesn't matter. You tell him he is, and you tell him he sets the tone, and you tell him that that the other guys all look up to him, and if they are looking up to him and he is setting the tone, but this is the sort of negativity he's bringing in, it's really not to the best interest of anybody. And I've actually had amazing experiences with using that technique with lots of men in my 10 years working in the construction industry. So sorry about the interruption there. Yes, the joys of working with
no problem.
But yeah, going back to the idea of what you can do if you're not ready to actually bring this to your supervisor, or if it is your supervisor who's the issue, you're not willing to bring this yet to your occupational health and safety committee at your workplace, or reach out in some ways. This is the sort of thing where this is why we really do need to make sure that we have strong community networks of tradeswomen who are there to support one another, because this is where you can get that support that you need to be able to get through the day. And so there are Facebook groups that we have. There are regional ones. If you go to the BCCWITT Facebook page, you can find those. If you're not on Facebook, you can also just contact the BC Centre for Women in the Trades, and we can put you in touch with tradeswomen in your community. We have meetups that are happening that we've helped to start, but also that have been started at a grassroots level by women in their communities. Some of those are happening virtually right now. So if you actually a lot of the time we're not supposed to be having any in-person meetups, so this is a way of using your computer to connect and have sort of a virtual hangout, and having that chance to have that sort of sense of community, that you can have that perspective of someone coming and saying, no, what you're experiencing isn't right and it isn't your fault and you don't deserve it. And the other thing I do want to make sure people know, that if you are experiencing severe psychological effects from this, one of the things you have to do is you do actually need to tell a doctor if you're experiencing anything that could lead to requiring making a claim through WorkSafe BC, because it's very important to have it medically documented that you are experiencing this sort of psychological distress. So before seeking out a counselor on your own, or if you actually can't seek out a counselor on your own, then it's really important to actually talk to, it doesn't have to be your doctor. You can go to a walk-in clinic if you just want to have that anonymity, but to have it like a record of that from a medical perspective, that this is a serious issue happening in your life.
Fantastic. Yeah. The other thing that I would say there is, and add to that is, as I talked about earlier, the bystander effect. So if you think that you are being bullied, is to find an ally. Find somebody in your workplace that you can talk to. Let them know what's going on, and tell them that this is going on for you. Now, that person may not feel like that they can jump in, but what they can do, or change it for you, but what they can do is help not be that bystander when something's going on. So they might be able to take that person aside and say, "Hey, listen, this is not cool. Like, let's not talk to each other that way." And so finding allies for yourself in the workplace is super important as well. Nicole, I wonder if we have any more questions from the audience. I wonder if we've lost Nicole there. Okay, so I guess find an ally. The other thing that I would suggest is that you document. If you are being bullied and you suspect you're being bullied, is document everything. You need to write down the dates, the times, who was involved, who was witnesses, who said what. Really start to document this so that you can speak to someone. The other part of this is to increase your self-care. You need to be able to cope with what's going on. Otherwise, bullying definitely can be so all-encompassing. It can really take over a lot of stuff that's going on for you. So it's important that we start to do increased self-care time, and that we're using that time to look after ourselves when we're outside of work. So I'm conscious of time here, and so I guess what I'd really like to say in conclusion then really is that with bullying, we don't want to just ignore it. We don't want to just laugh it off as just something that happens. You want to know the signs of bullying. You want to understand whether or not you are being bullied. Like I said, if you are going away from a conversation feeling a sense of shame, or you're going away from a conversation and you're kind of feeling, that wasn't right, I didn't feel good in that conversation, then just kind of stop and have a chat with yourself and say, is this bullying? And deal with bullies early. Stop it in its track. Like I said, bullying doesn't come in 100 miles an hour. It's that old adage of give an inch, take a mile is so true when it comes to bullying. So if something's going on, don't brush it off and kind of go, oh, it's just a little something, it's just a little comment, I didn't like it, but I'm going to let it go. The problem with that is that it can then get bigger and bigger and bigger. So you want to deal with bullies early. Strategies do exist to deal with bullies, and we talked about a lot of those, and we can get some resources up on the websites afterwards. And in addition to what Lindsay was saying there, you can also call, you can call us, you can call CIRP if you're qualified for our services, or you can ultimately, what you really want to do is speak to a mental health professional who can help you with some of the steps and some of the coping strategies. But you want to make sure that you do that in the right way, as Lindsay was saying. If it means that you need to go through work channels, and then you can contact and get in touch with a workplace a mental health professional. So again, very conscious of time. We've gone right over today. So I guess what I will say is we'll leave it there, and hopefully we'll see everybody next week.
Thank you so much, Vicky. This was a wonderful conversation, and yeah, I really got a lot out of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lindsay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If you liked our video and you want to see more like it, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel.